Hey, welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. It's great to have Robert DeLaurentis with me. Robert's out in Southern California. He's an entrepreneur. He is a very accomplished pilot. Started flying at 43 years old, and when you hear his story, you'll be amazed. He's an author. He's a speaker, and you got a movie coming out. So, Robert, great to talk to you. Great to see you today. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on your podcast, Craig. Yeah, we're really excited about the movie. It took 4 years to actually start and finish it. We shot 72 days of high resolution footage, and our cinematographer was a guy named Jeremy Lazelle, a Nat Geo cinematographer. Very lucky to have him. And of course, it was consolidated or edited down into 1 hour and 52 minutes of excitement. I think there's some funny scenes. There's definitely some stuff that scares you to death or near death. How about that?
There you go. All right, so let's talk about what's the name of before we forget, what's the name of the movie?
It's called Peace Pilot. And if you go to peacepilotthemovie.com, you'll see links for Amazon Prime, Google TV, and Apple TV as well. And yeah, it's a pretty good watch, I think.
Awesome. So, all right, so let's jump into your story. You were a naval officer at San Diego, and you started buying real estate.
Right. When all my friends were going to Vegas and having a better time than me on the weekends, I was actually using my credit cards for down payments on first single family residences and then houses with duplexes or granny flats, and eventually built the business to the point of retirement at around age 43, which is when I started to fly. And as a lot of people in the aviation industry know, it takes time and money together. And that's a tricky combination to manifest. But eventually it happened. And, I started flying. Our children's books, for example, recognize that people get excited or inspired to fly at a very, very young age. We figured that out because we were in a shopping center in South Africa, my mentor and I, and there was a little girl in a high chair, and her parents were talking, kind of ignoring her, and she was pointing up at the sky at a plane that was going over. And we thought, wow, that's when people have their interests when they're very, very young. And unfortunately, some of the aviation industry doesn't really recognize the potential pilots until a little bit later in life when they're closer to employment age. But we like to think we take them from the beginning to becoming a pilot. And at DeLaurentis International Airport, we have a discovery plane and a program for the high school kids to get excited about aviation. It starts with them watching the movie and a tour of the airport. They get to talk to a flight instructor, RC Club president, and then I do the tour of the airport. And finally, they get to meet Sugar, who's our very, very high-tech, very cool-looking polished aluminum Cessna 172 with lots of sponsorship and lots of cool gear.
So, all right, so DeLaurentis International Airport is located where?
On Whidbey Island, just off the coast of Seattle.
Yeah.
You can get there by car or plane or boat, or ferry, I should say. And very proud. It was a project that I didn't really, quite honestly, want when I first saw it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Kind of like with the circumnavigations, right? You think about it, and you go, that's a crazy idea, too dangerous, too expensive, too risky, but your mind doesn't really let go. And that's what happened with the airport as well. And it's kind of come full circle, right? Because there's the not-for-profit, there's the books, the audio books, the movie, the airport, and then of course the record-breaking flights and the Citizen of the World, which you see over my shoulder here.
So you're sharing some airspace with Navy F-18 Growlers up at Whidbey.
Yeah, that's your plane of choice, right?
E2 Hawkeyes, but there you go. I've been up to Whidbey a few times. So you started flying at 43, which is great. But you've got some fascinating adventures. Talk to me about you've circumnavigated the globe.
Twice, yeah. Once along the equator, and then once over the poles in 2019, 2020. And, you know, when I did the equatorial circumnavigation, most people that attempt that, 1 in 10 actually follow through. And then the people that generally do it never do anything like that again. It sort of scares them or burns them out. And I thought that was going to be it for me. But my dad sent me an article about how the North and South poles were the only places on the planet where peace had always existed. And I thought, boy, that would be cool to try a polar circumnavigation. There's just a handful of people that have done it successfully. And I thought, well, I need to tie this in with some sort of noble purpose because, you can have success in business, but it's not generally because you're just a great guy. I think it's because you're meant to do something more with that success. And for me, it was going to be to tie my three passions together, which was flying, spirituality, and business. And then the idea of the polar circumnavigation was born. We wanted to carry as much science as we could to move humanity ahead. We wanted to get as many sponsors as we could, which ended up being 95. It's like herding cats, of course, not very easy. Would have been easier to self-fund it, but it was so important to showcase, the amazing technology that's available out there, but more importantly, draw together a team with a bunch of experts in all these different areas because no one person can really, have all that knowledge. And then as a team, with a shared passion, move ahead. The science was quite remarkable, I would say. One thing was a NASA funded wafer scale spaceship, which is intended to replace Elon's rockets, basically. And the idea is that it's inefficient to put a heavy rocket motor, a lot of jet fuel, and an astronaut that maybe says things you don't always want him to say into space. So the idea is you have a circuit board and you blast it out into space using an electromagnetic cannon, and then you use lasers to push them even further. And the one that I carried, which I named after my mom, which was Frances, recorded 8,000 pictures, temperature, speed, altitude, and location. Our second experiment was plastic particles that we were tracking in the atmosphere. And we found that there were more over the North and South poles than there was over the equator where you would expect them to be, where all the population is. And that created this concept of plastic islands in the air, kind of like there's plastic islands in the ocean, which I think is more important to humanity because we're breathing the plastic in, right? We're not necessarily eating the plastic that's in the ocean.
Mhm.
So that's a big deal. And then biofuels over the North and South poles, and what you're probably familiar with, ADS-B out tracking, which is automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, and basically allows you to track an aircraft or a device that has the equipment anywhere on the planet. And it had never been done over the South Pole like that before.
Wow. So let's start with the equatorial
Okay.
journey. Where'd you start?
All these started in San Diego.
Okay.
Different aircraft, Piper Malibu Mirage for that trip called the Spirit of San Diego. And there is now a Spirit of San Diego Day, by the way, too.
So you flew from San Diego down to where?
Boy, you're going to make me try and remember 23 countries here.
No, well, so you get down to the equator. You get like, south of Panama, but not too far south of Panama. So I'm thinking my geography's not that great, but I'm thinking like you get Colombia, Nicaragua.
Yeah, a little bit of that. The big part of it was the Pacific Ocean, right? And that was on the way back, the biggest, baddest ocean, the intertropical convergence zone, the biggest distance, to be traveled by the Malibu, which I believe was about 11 hours in a plane designed to go 6. Whereas with the polar circumnavigation, the plane was designed to also go 6, but we stretched it out to 18.1, which you probably know, like with ferry tanks, you can double the range pretty reasonably, but to go beyond 3 times is scary, right?
So single engine around the world, following the equator. So you leave South America or Latin America and you fly over the Atlantic to Africa. First stops. What that must have been an interesting over the Atlantic. Must have been an interesting
Yeah,
ordeal. But then you land in Africa. There's probably not a lot of support there.
I actually did the North Atlantic, so I had the push, from behind,
Okay,
up through Canada, Greenland, Iceland, and then over into Europe. So yeah, terrifying. Greenland, Narsarsuaq, um, place where the GPS, I'm told, is not all that reliable. An ADF approach, automatic direction finding. That's where they used to ferry planes across the North Atlantic for the World War II.
sure.
Lots of history, big glacier on the, I guess, east side of the airport. So it's one way in and one way out. Yeah, and for a beginning, well, I had about 300 hours back then, so I was a pretty new pilot attempting that. For the polar trip, I had much more, which was, of course, an advantage, right?
How long did it take you to do the equator trip?
About 4 months.
Okay.
Then the polar flight was 8 months and 23 days. That was in part because of COVID, which slowed me down a bit. But you also have to wait for the poles to change temperatures. So our summer is, or our winter is summer at the South
Mhm.
Pole, and then it takes 6 months for the North Pole to heat up. So it was minimally going to be 6 months, but it ended up being 8 months and 23 days because, of COVID and the delays and the challenges.
And you did the polar trip, and what was your airplane?
It was a Turbine Commander 900, twin turboprop. That particular model was made by Gulfstream. Really a beautiful, intimidating, um, capable plane. What happened was Rockwell owned it, the same company that makes the B-2 bomber. And then when Gulfstream bought it, they made a lot of modifications to the plane. It's like they took their technology and improved it. So they put the Predator B drone engines on, increased the wingspan by 10 feet. See those winglets out there for
Mhm.
1983. That's pretty advanced to have winglets, right? They dropped the floorboard, they increased the pressurization. They made some really, really great improvements. And this 900 model, which is a little bit older or a little bit younger than the 1000 model in terms of capabilities, was actually the faster. And with those engines, the conversions to Dash 10T, it flew higher and cooler. So yeah, really the very best plane. And I went through a lot of planes. I looked at PC-12s and King Airs, and it was really these Dash 10 engines made by Garrett and then later Honeywell that really were magic.
Yeah, and you said you flew how long nonstop in the Commander?
18.1 hours nonstop.
How, what kind of mods did it take to get the range stretched 3x?
It took everything from 6 extra ferry tanks, system to heat the fuel inside the fuselage, nano ceramic coating on the outside of the plane to make it lighter, stripping it out, custom MT 5-bladed nickel tipped scimitar composite props, touch screens with backup knobs in case the fuselage got too cold, infrared cameras, first time on a Commander. These props were the first ones ever put on a Commander. We got field approval through the FAA. Lots of extra avionics, moving, like cutting away a pedestal down by my legs so I could have more movement, extra USB ports. I mean, the list is extensive. There was a step that would come out when you would open the door, which was the source for a lot of pressurization leaks. So we disconnected that and sealed up the fuselage. We put a different environmental system in that was supposedly more efficient. It turned out to be the bane of my existence there for quite a while. We eventually pulled it out, but some of the mods worked really well. Other ones were not great.
Did a lot of your sponsors help you? You had the props, Hartzell, or who was the
MT propeller.
MT?
Those
Okay.
guys have been with me. They were my second sponsor ever. and they built me a prop for my Malibu. And the funny thing about these MT props on the Commander, everybody said that fewer blades was better.
Mhm.
And what they found is that more blades are actually better. And you see that on a lot of the military planes because they have what, six, eight props on some of them. I think the C-130s, the newer ones, if I have it right, have eight blades. I could be
Yep.
totally wrong on that, but yeah. And then they're wooden props with a composite, coating on them so the water doesn't get in. But amazing, high performance, lighter, shorter, so there's less of a chance of a prop strike. And then the scimitar shape is pretty efficient, right, for keeping the prop tips below supersonic.
What did they learn about? I mean, were you the first? You obviously the first commander they probably put them on.
Right, right.
They're gonna. Are they? What did they learn on? What did they learn on your flights?
Well, they learn they can sell a lot of these props.
Yeah.
You can't ignore when you're looking for sponsors that you need a plane that not only performs well, but looks sexy as all get up, right? And I used to say that the Citizen of the World was a beautiful plane, but her performance exceeded her looks. And that meant that she looked great, but man, this thing was a rocket ship. For example, I was in Madagascar and there was a cyclone coming in, and we got kind of late notice on that and made a decision. Do you leave the plane on the ground and it gets destroyed, or you take it, through part of the cyclone? And I made that decision to do that. It was funny because when I was doing some simulations for Redbird, they asked me to write a number of them. I think it was about six, and they had determined that flying through the cyclone was too dangerous, and we didn't want to encourage anybody to do that. But I got to tell you, that plane was like a rocket ship out of there. It didn't lose a beat. It was impressive. It is an
Interesting. Yeah, well, the commanders are. Yeah, they've got a following.
Yeah, and they have a
Uh,
military pedigree, right? Because the original design came from a World War II plane, and then they kept upgrading it. Every time it changed hands, they put their newer stuff on it. And what I was told, I've heard a couple different stories, but I'm under the understanding that Gulfstream discontinued it because it was a complicated plane to build, but it was also affecting their jet sales because it was, near jet speed. So, um, yeah, remarkable plane. And, I mentioned, I think, that I had to force land the Citizen in Spokane December 2nd of last year, but we were able to recover the salvage aircraft. I have her back at DeLaurentis International Airport. We're going to put the wings back on and put her up on a stick right in front of the airport. So she'll be there to welcome people in. And MT is rebuilding the props. And I have a fiberglass expert fixing a winglet and the nose cone. So we're going to bring her back to her glory.
there you go. I love it. What'd you learn? I mean, flying solo around the world is a pretty
Terrifying. Terrifying.
terrifying, semi-smart, maybe. I don't know. You describe it. So,
That's
yeah,
funny.
you got a big team behind you. What are you guys learning? What are you guys learning as you're doing all this? I got to think it is
Uh,
terrifying.
I think it's really fun to watch somebody else take some risks, Um, but I guess what I learned is I, if you get lucky once, you're lucky, right? If you get lucky twice, you're really lucky. If you get lucky three times, really, really lucky. But what happens when it's five or six or seven or eight times? You need a better explanation, right? Because you can't prove it just with luck. And I think on this trip, there had to be some inspiration behind it. Like I felt like it sounds a little hokey, but I feel like I was on a guided mission, really. Um, it would have been so easy to take that plane out in so many situations, but we persevered. And I think in the movie Peace Pilot, you watch, and the first thing you think is, this guy is crazier than anybody I've ever met. That's what I think when I watch it. And then the things that we pulled off the first time, it's crazy. It brings me to tears. And not just like, little wet spot here. It's snot coming out my nose and the whole bit. it's a real, tear jerker.
How big was your team? I mean, were your sponsors part of your team? Were they following you? Were your who else was sponsoring? Who else was sponsoring you?
Well, 95 sponsors,
Yeah.
everybody from Concord batteries, Lightspeed headsets. Um, the guy that did the calculations for the wing loading was also a sponsor. Basically, if you talk to me, you were going to be a sponsor. Insurance companies,
Wow.
everybody possible. And, insurance or sponsors will give you a lot of in-kind stuff. So tires and inner tubes and
Mhm.
stuff like that. But there's a certain requirement for cash too, right? There's no way around that. And the DeLaurentis Foundation, which is basically me funding it, played a large part too. And it was funny because my original intention was to, and I use these exact words, bleed the business dry. And that was my plan when I was expecting it to take 6 months to get ready for the trip, but it ended up
Mhm.
taking 18. So I don't think there was anybody that was involved that didn't give. Susan Gilbert was my number one. She's the VP of the foundation. She helped me with websites and the books and
Mhm.
just giving me motivation, kind of like acting as a coach. And she charged me close to nothing for that stuff, right? We were all doing this for a passion project.
So what's the what? Yeah, you've got your books, and you're a philanthropist too, and you're flying around the world. And what was the goal? What was the message you were? What was the message you were
Yeah.
relaying to people as you landed?
Well, it started with an article from my dad that he found, and it said that there was always peace at the North and South poles, but basically nowhere else on the planet. So the goal was to connect the North and the South Pole and everybody in between on this mission of peace. And along the way, I did many interviews of different types of people, and it was cool because we were asking them, what does it mean to be a citizen of the world, which was the name of the plane? And how do you find peace in your world? It didn't matter, what color your skin was, what your religion was, what your socioeconomic group was, whether you're wealthy or poor. What we found was that people are very, very similar no matter where you go. And they wanted a few basic things. They wanted safety for their family, health for their family, financial security, peace, joy, happiness, and not a whole lot more, right? People are pretty basic in that regard. So it really sort of simplified things. Where we hit a real roadblock was, planes components fail, there's permitting and different countries don't want you there and all these different things. And as things were breaking down, it got harder and harder. So it got to feel like cosmic punishment. I know that sounds really extreme, but after the South Pole, I thought, I'm going to go on a global victory lap now. We accomplished the hardest part. The North Pole won't be as hard. And this is just going to be one good time. And it was funny because Jeremy, the cinematographer, just was laughing when I was saying that. I could see him smiling when I was saying it on film. And then I proceeded just to get my ass kicked all the way around the planet. And I thought it was kind of like maybe cosmic punishment or something. I'd done something wrong. And it wasn't until I got back to the States and I talked to one of my friends and she said, Robert, all living things suffer. And it's the one thing that we all have in common. So you think about like an animal, like a bird or something that maybe breaks a wing or breaks a leg, or a plant that gets run over or something. You know, that's what we have in common. And it was important for me to experience that. The the problem was, I was trying to feel or experience this inner peace, but I interviewed this guy in Brazil and he said, you can't find peace in the world until you find it in yourself. And I thought, well, I'm going through all these challenging times and frustration, and how can I ever get to a point of peace? And then that's when COVID hit, and I was stuck on a mountaintop in a place called the Zen Villa, in Sitges, Spain, which was just by luck. I was looking through the newspaper and they had cleared out all the hotels because tourists had to go home. But I was staying there probably against the will, of the Spanish government. And I came across Zen Villa, and I had written the book Zen Pilot, Flight of Passion and the Journey Within. And it was like this aha moment. Maybe that's where I'm supposed to be. And that's where I found my inner peace. Very spiritual place, very calm time for me, very reflective time. And then I was able to go in the world and find this peace that I was looking for.
What was the coolest, as you're traversing the poles, most memorable experience? What did there's always one.
Yeah, there's always one. When I was headed over the South Pole, I was talking to the South Pole station, a guy named Corey, and I was counting down my crossing time. And it was like 10, 9, 8, all the way down to 0. And I said, permission to overfly. And he said to me, he goes, negative, Ghost Rider. And I was like, Top Gun, right? That's the Top Gun scene. And I started laughing and he started laughing too. And I thought, well, we're both over the South Pole, the most remote place on the planet. Neither one of us is going to watch the new Top Gun movie. And it was funny because it was a human connection, right? Here we are both in this remote place, laughing about something that's, funny to both of us. And I thought, wow, I'm connecting to this guy at the South Pole. And that was really kind of magical for me. That was part of that was captured in the movie Peace Pilot. And it was kind of the boost that I needed because, to get to the South Pole, you burn more than half your fuel to get there, right? Because the plane is heavy and you got to carry all that fuel that you're going to carry back. And then you pray to God that the weather reports are right because you need that push from behind to make it back.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically, you're flying with less fuel than you really need to get all the way there and back. So
Where'd you land when you flew over the? Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. You keep
yeah,
going.
it was from Ushuaia to Ushuaia, but via the South Pole. And I had some intention of maybe going to New Zealand, but the fuel burn was not going to allow it. And for safety purposes, there's actually more stations on the way from Ushuaia south to the South Pole and back. So if you wanted to overfly the absolute greatest number of, occupied places, you would do that route down and back. And then I was trying to be even more clever and flying off the Antarctic Peninsula, trying to pick up a tailwind that I saw in the weather reports. A guy named Mike Jesh, who was an commercial airline pilot, helped me to see that and plan the route. But I never intercepted that. And I just kept getting further and further off course, trying to pick up the tailwind. And on that ADSB track, you'll see I make a pretty abrupt turn directly for the South Pole. And I thought, I'm going to run myself out of fuel trying to find this wind that's not happening. So at that point, that was a critical decision. Do you keep going off course and hope you're going to get the push, or do you just go direct? And yeah, I probably burned off some fuel getting off course there, but a scary decision as well, right?
Yeah.
Nuts.
What
Sounds.
else? What else did you fly that?
I was around 30,000, 31,000. The
Okay.
commander likes 32,000, probably the best. Um, there's not all the same restrictions when you're flying over a place where there's no aircraft. So I could have potentially gone higher, but I did all the calculations. What am I at? What's the fuel consumption and speed at this altitude? What if I go 1,000 feet higher? And that was something I did regularly. And 30, 31 was really a sweet spot.
Interesting. So mission accomplished. And so what are you doing? So you're flying a lot now. You've got your airport, and what's the mission now?
The mission now is to finish the airport. We've been selected as either the first or second urban air mobility hub for the state of Washington. Big deal, I think, for me, because, we're centrally located south of Canada, to the east of the San Juan Islands, to the west of the mainland,
Mhm.
and all those airports, right? SeaTac, Bellingham, Payne. And it's the ideal location for this urban air mobility hub because you would lift off and equidistant in every direction, you would find a population center. And we've spoken with the Washington State Department of Transportation. They're the ones that have said we're either first or second. We just got selected, again, the Washington State Department of Transportation did a video on four of the most sort of progressive airports in the state of Washington. We were selected. We're kind of a test bed, I like to think, for creative airport technology and ideas. So, when I got the airport, you get the negative criticism, oh, privileged white male wants an airport. But really, what we wanted to do is be a blueprint for the 14,000 private airports and convince them to open to the public like we were. And to do that, it's got to make financial sense. So all those people waiting around for money from the state, that they would eventually have to fight over with 10 other, groups. We just said, forget it. We're going to do it privately. And I took the whole sponsorship concept that I had used on my two flights, and we developed ways to make money. One of them was developing these special fuel tanks. Rather than spending $740,000 for two above ground tanks, we ended up buying two $70,000 mobile fuel trailers. And we decided that we would buy as a consortium with other airports to get the price down. And right now, I believe we're the cheapest fuel in the Pacific Northwest. So, that was a big success. We use something called Vector Plane Pass to charge a small fee for landing. Our airport was rated number one or the runway was rated number one on the, I want to say it's the pavement condition index, which is the quality of the asphalt and the runway. We're at 99 out of 100. Nobody else is even close to us. So, we get this automatic billing. We have charging stations. We rent to Life Flight, and we have, regular tenants in the hangars, and, a couple other things that we do to raise money. But I sort of approach it as a business person, kind of like aerospace executive would, right? It's got to make financial sense first. And everybody has to be represented, including the community. And this concept of, people flying in looking for freebies was not what we wanted. There's a lot of that in general aviation, but those times are over. I think everybody needs to have some skin in the game, right? These are all business concepts, right? And everybody needs to contribute and be part of the effort. We need to focus on kids, right? Because they're the future. And one of the things we did was this plane I call Sugar, polished aluminum 172G. We just loaded it up with avionics and all the other aviation goodies like electronic ignition and VGs, vortex generators, and just all the cool things that airplanes have. And most importantly, some of the avionics, because the kids like video games. I actually like avionics. I'm a button pusher, right? So the more clever stuff that you have in there and the more touch screens you get to operate, that's pretty fun. And then Sugar, the name of the plane, she just looks cool. A polished aluminum 172 with sponsor logos. Looks like a cross between a NASCAR and, some beauty contest, really. But yeah, and very recognizable, right? Ties her back to our airport. And we were going to use her for training, and then she got too nice, and we thought, okay, well, we'll use her for discovery flights for the three different high schools. And it's working out. I just got her back the other day, and I kind of like flying her too. Although I don't know if I'll be the one flying the kids around on the discovery flights. But yeah, just it's been fun to try some things, and we don't really answer to many organizations. We do answer to the FAA, of course, because we're federally regulated, but we haven't been funded by the state, the feds, the city, the county, or the port. So we sort of have that independence. And we have a guy, um, his name is David Parker from the FAA. I like to call him my bearded angel because he sort of came out of nowhere and he helped us with our runway striping and has helped us with adding some lights, keeping our instrument approach, and adding another one. And he's been enormously helpful. You know, the FAA can get a little bit of a bad rap because they're the enforcer, but these guys, man, perfect timing. You know, just as we were getting ready to paint, um, and he's been a tremendous help. So I consider the FAA one of our supporters.
Very cool. I love it. So you're 43 years old when you got into flying.
Uh-huh.
What made you decide to take your first flight? Was it something you always wanted to do? Did you just get out of Lindbergh Field and say, I'm going to go do it? What,
Yeah, my first flights were out of Montgomery Field,
okay.
not far from Lindbergh, right? I just always loved flying as a kid. I had the string control planes, model planes,
Hmm.
RC planes, and honestly, I wasn't good at flying them or building them. But it took having time and money together to actually, you know, pursue my licenses that I would eventually get at age 43. But it was always on the back burner. And, you know, I'd see a plane and think that's the coolest thing ever. I want to learn how to fly. And then finally I had the success in business and it enabled me to start flying. But it's really funny how one thing has to happen before another, right? So again, aviation is fueled by good business, hopefully. So I had some business success, then the flying, wanted to give back, started the not-for-profit, and then found these different ways through scholarships and books and audiobooks and movies and, airports, that sort of thing. And in the process, we create a legacy, an aviation legacy, which I think is really important because um, aviation has a lot of people that take, but doesn't have as many that give. And I think that's super important, right? To keep the industry alive and flourishing.
Yeah, we're at a crossroads now, I think, with the kids. It's very expensive to learn how to fly. And you think about the United States, North America, Canada, we talk about, becoming a pilot like it's a career, it's, it's a career we can get into. But if you go in other parts of the world,
No
there's no
way.
general aviation in existence. A kid doesn't know what an airplane, it's the first time he's ever seen an airplane is when they come to the United States and learn how to fly them at one of these flight schools.
Yeah.
So it's we're very Europe, I guess, is probably a lot of gliders in Europe, not a lot of GA, but a lot of gliders or maybe some GA. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Egypt
we're
had two GA planes when I visited, and they were light sport. So it wasn't like a Cessna 172 or, any of those. It's amazing what's happened in the US and hard to duplicate, right? Because I know as an airport owner, I'd much rather see a King Air come in and take 300 gallons of jet fuel than a experimental plane come in and try and buy 10, 10 gallons of avgas. It's not even worth our time. Um, so, I get why these airports don't want it, and they're slower, right? They mix things up in the pattern. There's a lot of reasons why GA is needs some help, right? Needs some help.
but it's important. The thing is that GA is it's the starting point
Yeah.
for commercial, for business and commercial.
Yeah.
So that's the problem is that King Air, the pilot who flies that King Air had to start somewhere, right? And that's in GA.
It was probably in the US too, right? Even if
Uh,
he or she
yeah.
was from a different country. So yeah, it's the way I've chosen to give back. And since I started the foundation in 2013, I have not taken a penny out of it. I just put money in and we fund projects, as they come available. So it really takes a lot. And we're realizing, with an airport, we're funding this thing with a fire hose. But still well worth it. I'm so happy to be contributing in aviation.
I love it. So the movie is called Peace Pilot. And where can people find it?
Well, they could type in peacepilotthemovie.com and they'd come to a landing page which would have links to Amazon Prime, Google TV, and Apple TV.
Hmm.
So that's probably the easiest way to do it.
And your website is Flying Through Life with
Right.
THRU, Flying Through THRU Life.
That's right. And if you have a desire to read or watch videos, there's hundreds of hours worth of information there. In fact, when people approach me about doing an equatorial or occasionally a polar circumnavigation, I say you need to start there and allow, weeks of time to read through all that stuff because we very carefully documented these things. And there's a lot of information there if you're interested. But
What do
the
you like to What do you like to speak about? I know you're out. You've written some books and you get on the speaking tour. What do you like to speak about?
I like to mix together my three passions, which are aviation, spirituality, and business. They seem to blend pretty nicely into what we do. And I think, all this is inspired in so many ways. And, when I was in business school and reading all the Harvard case studies that every business student, no matter where you are, probably reads, I thought, well, we're all going to get out of school and have this same education, and then they're going to throw us all into this group and we'd have to compete. But for me, the spiritual concepts that I learned and wrote about in one of my books called Flying Through Life was this extra edge that we used. And it tripled the size of my business using those concepts. So I think it's important as well. And this is fit together very nicely, over time into a neat little puzzle that seems to be working pretty well.
I love it. I love it. Let's do this. You're getting ready to head down to the South Pole to go see what you saw from the ground, right?
That's right. Probably a lot of penguins, thousands of penguins, I'm expecting.
There you go. I flew over the North Pole once, and it was fascinating. Or I don't want to even say it was North Pole, but it was, yeah, northern Canada in the winter on a beautiful, clear day over the Hudson Bay.
Nice.
And it was one of the most spectacular sights. So I'm sure it was I'm sure it was awesome.
Were you in a military plane at the time, or?
Actually, I was a 767, I think, coming back from Sweden.
Oh, nice.
But it was great. Now the military stuff I flew out of San Diego, and all the stuff I did was Panama and Western Pacific cruises.
Yeah,
So
I got a certain charge from being in the most remote places I could. And the North Pole, there's the North Pole of inaccessibility and then the magnetic and then the true North Pole. But yeah, when you're up there looking out the window, oh my God, there's nothing that compares to that type of experience as a pilot, I think.
it's an amazing feat. Congratulations on your success, Robert. It's great to have you on and to have somebody who's circumnavigated the globe a couple different ways is pretty impressive. What do you fly now? What's your airplane of choice now?
Well, I just closed escrow on a very highly modified Malibu Mirage, much more capable than the one that I flew, around the equator. I've got Sugar. I've got a 182 on Aeroset floats, and then I've got a Carbon Cub. So yeah, that's it in terms of planes. All very specialized, right? But don't make me pick a favorite. I do have the Citizen of the World, though she's not flying anymore, but that would easily be my favorite plane of all times. Yeah.
I'll bet. Thank you for coming on. Let's do this again.
Yeah, absolutely, Craig. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you for what you do for aviation and the aerospace community. It takes people like you, to make this happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming on. Thanks.
Have a great one. Bye bye.